Welcome to Backstage, the Enharmonic. I'm your host, Sean J. Kennedy. Today's guest is Clayton Cameron. He's an American drum set artist who's most notably performed with Sammy Davis Jr. and Tony Bennett. His nickname is the Brushmaster. In drumming circles, he's most well known for his codification of how to play brushes on the drum set by developing brush rudiments and taking brush playing to the next level. I'm very happy that he took some time to talk with me today because he is truly one of my drumming heroes. I remember seeing him perform back in 1994 on MTV Unplugged with Tony Bennett. It was the first time I'd ever seen Clayton. And when he came out to do his drum solo and played the brushes, my whole approach to playing drums changed that evening. And then jumping ahead to 2010, I was out at the NAMM show in Anaheim, California, and I was there promoting my new book, Rock Solid Drums, which I co-wrote with my friend Liberty DeVito. Well, there was an event in the evening, and I happened to see Clayton. I'd never met the gentleman, and I saw him standing in a crowd at a concert, and I walked up to him to shake his hand and introduce myself, and I told him who I was. I said, "Hi, Clayton, I'm a huge fan of yours. My name is Sean Kennedy." And without dropping a beat, he looked at me and said, "I know who you are." And my jaw probably hit the ground. Now, my guess was that he knew who I was because he happened to be standing with a bunch of folks from Carl Fisher, the company that publishes both of our books. But regardless of the reason that he recognized who I was, it's a moment that you never forget when one of your heroes looks at you and says, "Yes, I know you." So here's my interview with Clayton Cameron.
Hey, Clayton, are you there?
I'm here. How you doing, Sean?
Oh, great. I'm good, Clayton. I'm so glad to talk to you. Thanks for taking some time. Looking back, what's the earliest memory you have of music having an impact on you in some way?
The earliest. Well, I had a next-door neighbor whose father, when I was growing up, I was, around 6 or 7 years of age, and their dad was this upright bass player, and I used to see him go to work every night. And, take his bass, put it in the car, and then he'd go. I have no idea where he played or whatever, but I thought it was, really cool. And then his son, who was older than me, about 5 years, started a band. And I remember at that time I had been playing bongos. I had been given a set of bongos by a next-door photographer who used them as props. And so that was my first instrument, a set of bongos, and I used to play them like every day, every freaking day. And, you had to light the match to heat up the skin to tune them and all that. So I had that going on. And then I remember they had kind of like a Buddy Miles, Jimi Hendrix-style band. And I remember hearing them, and then I also remember the drummer having his drums spread out on the front lawn, like he's packing them up or something. And I was like, wow, how the hell does he even remember how to put all that stuff together? And I became fascinated with the drum set. And so during that period, another next-door neighbor who used to be a professional musician invited me over to his house to jam with him. And he played congas, and then there was like a vibe player, and I sat underneath the vibe. I remember playing my bongos with these guys. And so that was like the first time I ever played with anybody. And his name was Lee Schamberger. He was like another next-door neighbor who happened to be the father of, one of my friends. So because of that, Lee Schamberger ended up telling my dad that I had some talent. And then after that, I ended up getting a drum set because Lee Schamberger told my dad you should get him, a set of drums.
How old were you at that jam session?
Yeah, that jam session, by then, I was probably around 8 years old, 9 years old, something like that. I had no idea what I was doing.
Were either of your parents musical in any way? Did they play as a hobbyist or professionally or anything?
No, other than high school, a high school clarinetist, my mom, that was it. My dad, he was a big jazz fan and listener. And my mom, she used to play clarinet. That was it. There was nothing, firsthand. There was. I think I had my dad's uncle who died probably when he was 92. I think like for 30 years of his life played accordion. And that was it. You know?
Awesome.
So that was it, yeah.
Did they have a lot of LPs spinning, like with different styles, or was it mainly jazz as you were growing up?
A lot of vocal jazz, you know, like Ray Charles, Nancy Wilson, you know, that sort of style. And the instrumental stuff, you know, my dad had a lot of Miles Davis, you know, Dizzy Gillespie, you know, Coltrane. You know, he had a lot of the, you know, jazz from the 40s on up kind of thing, you know. But big, you know, Diana Washington, you know, fan, you know, so, you know, Nat King Cole, that sort of thing. So we had that kind of music around. But then also, you know, we had a lot of, my dad had, you know, they had a record player that, you know, they finally let me use, and then I got my own, and then, you know, we had a lot of, you know, R&B, Motown, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So did you gravitate more towards the Motown, or were you kind of open to everything as a young man?
Well, what's interesting is when I started buying records, I was buying, you know, the first records I listened to were my dad's. And so, you know, when I heard the first record that I heard of Miles, you know, I never asked my dad if I could play his records, but one day he wasn't home, and I just thought the album cover was pretty interesting, and so I put it on, and it was Cookin' with Miles Davis, you know. It was that record, and so then I read the liner notes and go, oh, then I tried to find everything with Tony Williams on it, then, you know, that led to, you know, it was back to Philly Joe Jones and Elvin Jones, you know, so it's kind of like it started with Tony Williams with Miles, you know, so I think it was Miles Smiles that I looked at that had Tony's name on it. Of course, Cookin' and whatnot, you know, would have been Philly Joe and back then, and who else am I thinking of? Anyway, I'm going blank, but I think I just kind of worked backwards, you know. So anyway, so that's kind of how it works.
Okay, great. Now, did you participate in any school bands or anything or did you just kind of play on your own at home or with friends?
Well, once I started taking private lessons, my mom, you know, insisted that I take lessons, and so they sent me to a place not far from my home called Grant's Music Center. And so over there, you know, I started at 12, and I was playing my rudiments and all of that, and so, you know, for a couple of years, I was, you know, pretty much just doing my lessons, which kind of was more like snare drum and reading out of the different books, you know. And then I would listen to my record player, which would play like, you know, all the Motown and Stax records. I would do all that stuff, you know, at home. But then what happened was by the time I got to be, you know, around 16, you know, they had a rehearsal band at Grant's Music Center. And so I used to hang around and just listen to the big band rehearse. And so then one day the big band, the guy that was playing drums, didn't show up, and so they told me to play. So I got, you know, kind of like a baptism by fire playing with the big band under the direction of, ironically, one of the Motown arrangers for Diana Ross and the Supremes and for the Temptations. His name was Gil Askey. And so Gil Askey was a jazz musician that Berry Gordy heard, you know, some of his arrangements he was doing and said, hey, can you know, do that for me, but for the R&B. And so that's when Gil Askey started working for Berry Gordy. So anyway, so I worked with Gil, you know, for many, many years, starting when I was 16 years of age, you know, playing with the big band, and, you know, and they were all older guys, and so I had a lot of mentorship, you know. Earlier, I got to digress. Earlier, I was trying to think of Jimmy Cobb. For some reason, Cobb was not coming to mind, but I was thinking of Jimmy Cobb. Anyway,
right.
So you know, so under the direction of Gil, who was not a drummer, he was a trumpet player and arranger. I mean, he was probably one of the best teachers I ever had, you know, just to play music. Not so much the drums per se, because he couldn't teach me technique or anything like that, but he really, you know, showed me how to, you know, set up the band and what I should be doing and all that. You know, I was pretty lucky, because this was all outside of any organized, you know, high school band, because we didn't have one. We had barely had a marching band where I went to school.
Okay, wow. Did you participate in any of that stuff?
Yeah, I did. In LA we have the All City Marching Band, so I did that for 3 years, and I was in there. We had some really great cats in there. I mean, the first year, James Bradley Jr. was in that band. Of Chuck Mangione fame. He, we were around the same age. He was about a year older. And we were all in high school, so he was in All City Marching Band and graduated and started playing with Chuck Mangione and that famous recording, Feels So Good. And we were just all impressed, like, oh man, James made it already, that sort of thing. So so All City Marching Band was a great band. Got to play a couple of Super Bowls, got to do the Rose Parade every year. So that was a fun band.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't core style or anything like that. It wasn't all that serious, but it was just. In fact, I wrote some of the cadences when I was a junior. I wrote some of the cadences, and I think to this day I still hear part of one that I wrote.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So most of the people that are going to be listening to this podcast, they're going to probably associate your name with Tony Bennett and Sammy Davis Jr. and all the unbelievable names that you've played with. But since I'm going back to the beginning, before all of that and the big limelight and all that, was there a moment that you can think of where you're like, you were coming up, this kid who was drumming, and all of a sudden you were at some gig, and in the back of your mind you're like, yes, I've made it. I've made a huge step forward, and I could consider myself a pro now. Like, do you have a moment like that you can remember?
Well, I think, it wasn't all really that glamorous, but just the fact that after I graduated from college, didn't have a job, trying to figure it out, moved out of my parents' home, was staying at a buddy's house, and, then I got a call that said, hey, there's a guy in Las Vegas that needs a drummer. You'll be working 6 days a week. You have Mondays off or whatever it was. And so then, I said, sure, I'll do it. The guy called me, and I said, when do you need me? And he said, I need you tonight. His name was Kirk Stewart. He was a great piano player. He used to work with Sassy, and he's on the Live in Tiffany Gardens is the record. He sings a duet with her on Misty. Anyway, with Sarah Vaughan. And so he was a great piano player and great singer, but unfortunately he sounded just like Nat Cole, and people knew that, and so they would always request Nat King Cole tunes and all this, and he hated that. But anyway, he gave me a call, and he said, I said, what do you need? And he said, I need you tonight. I said, well, I can't make it tonight, but I can be, to Las Vegas tomorrow. So basically, I got the call, and the next night, I was, starting the next night, I was working 6 nights a week. And I just felt like I was a working musician. I had a gig. I had my own apartment. I was paying bills. I was getting credit. It's like, okay, I'm working. So it wasn't glamorous, but it was a job. I had a job. So that's what it. So that's. But if you ask me, like when you felt like you really made it, I had a really funny feeling when I had the audition for Sammy Davis Jr. My audition was terrible. I wasn't great. But they, George Rhodes, the conductor, believed in me. And once I got the job, they flew me. I mean, it was about a month after or 2 months after the audition, so I just figured I didn't have a job. But then I finally got a call maybe 2 months later saying, hey, we're going to have a plane ticket for you to Minnesota to play with Sammy Davis Jr. So I was like, oh, okay. So I still didn't know whether I had the job or not. I guess, they might be just trying me out on the job. So I had no idea. So I flew to Minnesota, and we were playing the Minnesota Fairgrounds, right next to the piglet races. There was a stage. And so, I get there. I'm all nervous. I set up my drums. We run, and Sammy always performed with big band and strings. So we always had, at least 30 people on stage, with 18 in the band and, at least 20 strings. So, probably like 38 people, really. And so anyway, there's no real long rehearsal. There's a rehearsal of, a couple of hours, but, we couldn't possibly cover everything in that book. It was a very thick book. And Sammy Davis Jr. was not at the rehearsal. So, basically I was doing the rehearsal without his vocal. And anyone that's ever done, this kind of music or any kind of music that has vocal and you're doing without the vocal, you're making the hits, you're swinging, you're doing the groove. But until that artist really comes out, it feels different. So Sammy comes out that night, and it was like killing. And I had to pinch myself and say, just make sure you pay attention, turn the pages, just don't get lost. Because really, don't get lost in. That was my main thing. Don't get lost. Don't get lost in the music. And so I was pretty successful at that. Don't remember getting lost or anything like that. The gig was over. Sammy had all 13 people in his entourage, took us out to dinner. And I still hadn't met him. I still hadn't met Sammy. And so he goes to the front of the table and he clicks his, bangs a fork on the glass and says, excuse me, everybody. Everybody says, great show tonight. I want to welcome our new drummer. And he said, didn't say my name. He never said my name ever. I don't ever remember him saying Clayton. He said, I want to welcome Big C. And he always called me Big C. And we always called him, we always called him Mr. D. We never called him Mr. Davis. We always called him Mr. D. So I was Big C and he was Mr. D. So that's when, I said, I finally made it, if you will. But my hero was Tony Williams, and at that time when I was getting with Sammy Davis Jr., I was 22, 23, and I was like, well, big deal. Tony Williams was playing with Miles when he was 17, so but now at 57, I'm going, boy, you were really lucky. So but in the mind of aspiring, young man or woman, you're really trying to do something and you're practicing all those hours and you have your goals and you have people that you look up to, and so that's your litmus test, So Tony Williams was mine, and I would, I didn't live up to Tony Williams, but at least it was you're shooting for the stars,
Did playing with Sammy all those years, I'm sure this is a ridiculous question, but did it change your approach to playing? And how? If so, how?
Oh, man, I learned so much on that gig. And I learned so much that I couldn't even possibly really digest all of it. Really. There's a video. There's a video on YouTube with Sammy Davis Jr. He's training force with Louis Bellson, King Erickson, what's his name, Levine, and then Mendoza. I think Jack, maybe Jack Sperling, and then I forget the pardon me, I'm forgetting the bongo player's first name, but his last name is Mendoza. And if you listen to those fours, you listen to the dance that Sammy does. With all due respect to all those drummers, not one of them could match his swing. It was just incredible. 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 And so when I had the opportunity all those years to play with Sammy, for 8 years I was his last drummer, one of the epiphanies that I had was when we did 2 weeks with Jerry Lewis. It had nothing to do with Jerry. It had to do with 3 tap dancers that were on it. And a lot of people have probably heard this before because it's a story that I've told many times, but it's such an important part of my development. Well, we had Sandman Sims, Arthur Duncan, Bunny Briggs, and then one night Greg Behind appear on stage. But for 2 weeks, we had the first 3 gentlemen. And each night, they would come out and they would dance to Cute. And their styles were all different. And I would just keep time. All I was doing was keeping time. But each night, I would go back to my room and go, man, what was that they call them combination. So what was that combination that Sandman did, and then I would try to do it with the brushes. So it was impossible to do what they were doing with the brushes unless I had to develop being able to sweep and tap and get in and out of those things and roll quickly. There was no stopping and going. It had to be fluid. So I ended up developing brush rudiments for myself, like the paraswivel, which is based on a paradiddle, but instead of a diddle, you do 2 sweeps. So that was the first rudiment that I developed for myself. And so that enabled me to emulate those guys, just coming up with the different rudiments, because I had to, because you had to develop a muscle memory of quickly getting in and out of those sounds. And those combinations, and all those guys swung, and they swung in different ways. Bunny Briggs had this rapid-fire tap, but it would still be swinging. Arthur Duncan was real acrobatic and would, do things on his toes and heels, Sandman Sims would slip and slide his rhythms, and Sammy Davis Jr. could do all of that. I mean, he was freaking incredible. So for 2 weeks, I watched those guys every night, and the only reason that I became unique, if you will, with brushes is because of those 2 weeks. Only because I was so interested in what they were doing and how they swung. It's just incredible. And, to this day, those were probably two of the most important weeks of my life working on that show because of Sammy and the dancers. Yeah, incredible. And to this day, it still stands. I mean, if you hear that stuff, you just go, wow, it's just right. There's no, you don't change a Monet, a Manet, you don't do it. It's just right, a Picasso. It's just right. There's nothing you can do. You can do other things, you can do other styles, but there's no improvement on that,
Right.
It was just right. It was just so incredible.
So I have your brush book, and you said something right away. So it's almost like those 2 weeks were the impetus for the multimedia and the whole book, because you have a lot of your rudiments in that book that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that book would come years later. The only reason that I did the book is because I finally came up with a mantra that says the way you create rhythm when sweeping is by changing direction, and therefore each direction change is going to equal some sort of note. And so once I came up with that mantra, then I was able to create the language for the book. But prior to that, I was not going to do a brush book, because I felt that all the brush books, and all due respect to all the artists that have ever done them, the brush books don't really do them justice, because the codification does not match what the sound is that they're doing. So in other words, if you see all these circles drawn under a quarter note, if you actually play a quarter note, if you actually play a circle on a drum using a brush, it's going to sound like a triplet. So you're hearing a triplet and you see a quarter note, so they don't match. So that's
perfect.
Yeah. So that's the issue, that I have, and it has nothing to do with the artist. It has to do with the codification in the books.
No, that's exactly right, because, I'm digging into the book as much as I can, going back and trying to get some of those patterns you laid down. And I use it with all my students that want to get into brushes. I'm like, because what I like about the book is if they've done traditional snare drum books and drum set books, your book speaks the same language, and it makes sense when you're looking at the image and then playing it. Like you can see the sound, or vice versa, which is really great, which is what I love about it.
Right. Good. Thank you.
If I happen to have your iPod here, what might I see on your most recently played list? Like, is there anything that might surprise some of my listeners? Like, wow, Clayton listens to that? Or, so what might be up there in your top 10 list?
Wow. You might... I love John Bonham. I love... Well, one of my buddies, I love his new record. It's not even out yet, but Billy Childs. That might not be a surprise. He's a great artist. I really like a lot of vocal stuff too, like just artists that can really sing, like some Katie Lang might be, because I work with Katie a little bit, and the way she sings, and not to mention other great vocalists. But that would be like a surprise,
Right.
That would be a surprise. What else? I don't think it would be any surprise that, I like classical music. I mean, I played it all throughout college. Didn't really do much of it afterwards. But, who doesn't like, Stravinsky and Rite of Spring,
Right.
or some Ravel or Debussy every now and then. So, all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think those would be the surprises, though. That sort of thing.
Right. So just to go back, you did mention college there. Did you play symphonic percussion like xylophone, marimba, and timpani at some point?
Yeah. That's so I graduated with a BA in music performance from Cal State University Northridge, and I studied with Karen Irvin. May she rest in peace. With Karen Irvin for 4 years, and so I was very much into classical percussion. In fact, I didn't play in any of the jazz bands there. I don't think I was really, it was really hard for me to focus on, because I wasn't as advanced as some. It was kind of like I knew I had enough information to get me in trouble, and so. Though I was playing on the outside, but there was kind of a different criteria, I don't know, whatever, in college to get in the band and all that. So, but that wasn't because I was playing so much on the outside of school. I didn't really, I think I auditioned maybe the first 2 years, and then after I didn't get in, I didn't bother anymore, and I just focused on the symphonic. But at the same time, while I was in school, I ended up recording with Gerald Wilson Big Band while I was there, and so that was and Paul Humphrey was the other drummer on it, and he had all these LA greats, like Ernie Watts on there, some names I don't know, like Bobby Bryant, who was a great lead trumpet player at that time, and Gerald Wiggins on piano, John B. Williams on bass, who used to be on the Arsenio Hall show, played with Nancy Wilson and all that. So, I was the rookie, but Gerald Wilson believed in me, and he hired me to play his record, and so I did that. And so I was playing on the outside, and so I think a lot of guys didn't even know that at some point, didn't really realize that I could play drum set. So, but it's kind of like, I teach now at UCLA, and I get it. So sometimes, there are little things that you see determination in people. Maybe they haven't had as much time or experience, or teachers or whatever. And, but, there's definitely, you can see that if they really stick with it, they could really be something. They could really develop. But what's not apparent are the variables and those things that you can't really see, people's experience and, who they may come across and what their milieu is, what's around them. And so I think for me that it just took a little longer for it to all come together, if you will. And so I have no hard feelings, I didn't play in a jazz band or anything like that. But I know that all that stuff really, really helped me. For instance, I mean, I hardly ever play vibes or marimba anymore, but I use the muscle grip to play 4/6 on the drum set. So, and I've done some recordings that way. I mean, you wouldn't know it, but I've done probably the most notable that I know is we did a recording with Tony Bennett called Hot and Cool, a tribute to Duke Ellington. And so we got Wynton Marsalis in the band, all these great cats in the orchestra, and we do Caravan. And so it was done in New York. And so, so I said, this would be a perfect tune for that, to do that, to, get that sound, because the sound is so different. And so, so I did the muscle grip, if you will, on Caravan on that recording. And I remember one artist came up to me and said, "What are you doing playing 4/6 on the drums?" Just jokingly, and it was a great, great sound. So all that stuff, comes into play. I don't take anything for granted. I think my college days were great. And everything that I learned, and like I said, as a teacher, as a professor at UCLA, I tell the kids all the time, these young adults when they come in, they say, "Look, man, you gotta figure out how to manage yourself, how to manage your time, because that's the most difficult thing for a musician is you're playing all these multiple instruments and trying to really, really get the time in to do your studies and the time in to get your practice. Because you can cram maybe on a test, but you can't cram when you got to perform. Because if you can't do it, you can't do it. So there's a lot of challenges that way. But so I just feel that everything can start coming together. Hopefully you have a long career and you just get better and better, and that's what I think I'm doing now. So
Great, it's really interesting. Your TED Talk you did, I've watched that a few times. That was brilliant. I love that stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, that's which one did you see?
I think I saw two of them. There was one about math.
Yes, okay, yeah. Arithmetic,
yep.
Yeah, that one was really popular. Yeah. I had no idea. The TED Talk people called me after I had done one before where I kind of give a history of jazz drumming in America. And and so then they called and said, hey, can you do something for kids? There's going to be a bunch of high school kids and middle school kids. Can you do something for them? So I was like, okay. So I flew to New Orleans and I came up with the concept the night before.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I had kind of done, it was always in the back of my mind, something that I kind of expressed before. In fact, I think I did it the first time I ever did something like that was Tony Bennett on when MTV was in its infancy. And we were playing, well, not in its infancy. This was in the 90s. MTV's more like 80s. But, Jon Stewart's show was happening. So I think we were doing some stuff in the early 90s, and we're doing something with some kids. And Tony Bennett turned to me and said, hey, Clayton, can you tell the kids something about music? And so I think I did that kind of like the same thing, but very, very condensed, just a little math and music. In fact, now, I'm at UCLA. I've been there 10 years. And so I have a class now that UCLA has accepted, and I'll be teaching hopefully in the winter. And I call it, call it rhythmic theory, as in harmonic theory, but this is rhythmic theory. And it's based on my TED Talk, but much more expansive. And so I'm really excited about that, and we'll see how it goes.
Wow, I wish I lived closer. I'd take it. I'm all the way out here. Sounds fun.
I'm excited about it. It's and just in a nutshell, it's basically there's so much theory and emphasis put on harmony, which it should be, but what I find over the years and so on, what I've read in different books and whatnot, they don't really give rhythm a whole lot of credit. However, what really struck me is one time I was in a kids museum, children's museum here, or a science center here in Los Angeles area, in Santa Ana, and they have what they call a seismograph. This cylinder is a seismograph, and it has a little metal floor that vibrates. And the children are invited to put their hands inside of it and mix the sand up that's inside the cylinder. And so, so about 6 kids could probably fit around it, and it's hot, just high enough for them to reach over and mess up the sand. And what happens is the algorithm, the vibration, the pulse that is fed and that is vibrating the floor causes the sand to go right back into the same shape. So you can mess it up all you want, but the sand ends up going back to the same shape. And if you change the algorithm, it'll go to another shape. So I started thinking about that in terms of rhythm and rhythmic cycles. One of the most used rhythmic cycles is a cycle of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, bang, 2, bang, down, 2, dang, 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 down, 2, dang, 1. If you're in 4. So everything from a bossa nova to clave to a second line beat to big band figures, you hear this sort of thing. But then what happens if you play a different cycle? That feels a different way. So all these different things are not arbitrary, just like the algorithm on a seismograph. So by really honing in, like if you're really trying to play some jazz, if you look at Riley's book, even though it's not emphasized, most of the stuff is based on cycle of 3. And so that's what my class is about, and not just about jazz, but just music, period. Not to say, oh, this is that. No, let's listen to that, and what do you hear? Well, you might hear a cycle of 3. You might hear, a cycle of 5. You might hear, 7 or whatever it is. And it has a certain feel to it. And, depending on the tempo, that also contributes to it. And we're not even talking about meter. We're just talking about whatever the pulse is, So anyway, so I'm excited about it. That's kind of it in a nutshell, but it's a lot to it. I'm excited about getting ready for it.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I hope it goes well. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Is there anything you like to do outside of music? Do you have time to do anything outside of music?
Oh yeah. Well, I make the time. What I like to do. I mean, I like to write music. Of course, I like to perform. Those are 2 things that I really like to do. And then outside of music, I'm a tennis player. So I mean, I love to watch tennis. I love to play tennis. So I try to get in, some tennis at least, a couple of times a week, that sort of thing. And, it's good exercise, and it reminds me of playing drums, because it's like you can't just go out on a tennis court and think you can play. you can't. It's just like drum. You can't just, maybe, someone who's talented could get a groove right away. But when we're talking about really playing some drums and, having, some versatility on the instrument and all that, you're just not going to walk up and just start doing it, So, so that I think that's why I really liked it a lot. I started taking lessons years ago, and this is a completely different story. But one of my first teachers was Andre Agassi's dad, Mike Agassi.
Really?
Yeah, and just because why I worked in Las Vegas with Sammy Davis Jr. and he was the maitre d' at the hotel. He was the
really?
maitre d' in the showroom. Yeah, he was the maitre d' in the showroom. And I was in the celebrity room, and I happened to see Andre Agassi play tennis when he was 15. And then someone told me this kid's dad, he wasn't famous at the time, and then someone said, well, his dad works where you are. And I said, oh, really? I'll go say hi. So I went over to Mike Agassi, and I said, hey, I saw your son play tennis today. It was incredible. He goes, oh, you saw Andre play? And I said, yeah, he's great. And so then he said, well, what are you doing tomorrow morning? I said, well, I'm off until I work at night like you. The man was so gracious. He picked me up every day that week and taught me how to hit a forehand. And that's how I started playing tennis.
It doesn't get much better than that.
No, that was it. I mean, so I can just look back on those moments and go, okay, yeah, what did Mike tell me? So anyway. But so I've been very blessed in many ways, but I love to play tennis, to answer your question, outside of that. And, my son and I also have a thing for cars. So whatever car show we can go to, we do.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, to tie it all together, you talked about your college experience. I'll just tell you about mine real quick. When I was an undergrad in college, I saw you on MTV Unplugged with Tony Bennett. And that was a pivotal moment in my career as a musician, I think, because he introduced you, came out, and you destroyed the snare drum, and, you went crazy with the brushes, and it totally changed my approach to playing drum set. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was like I had played drum set, and I think what had happened, I had done everything. I was like, was I an orchestral musician? Was I a drum set player? Was I into marching arts? But I saw that, and it was like something went off in my head, and I'm like, that's the real deal. I have to get more into that. So I bought, I think the day after that, I went out and bought Sinatra's The Capitol Years. Then I started getting Sammy stuff, Tony stuff, all the, American songbook singers.
Wow.
And yeah, and I got brushes, and I really got into it and stuff, and I started paying attention more, and it really opened up a lot of opportunities for me because I started auditioning for different groups, and they're like, what do you listen to, man? Like, because no one else is coming in there playing brushes, and I'm like, oh, this is the stuff I like to listen to. So I just wanted to take a minute and thank you for all the inspiration you gave me, starting back in the 90s through now. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, those are some good days for me too. And I had already, played with Sammy, who I consider my greatest boss ever, and got to work with Sinatra and Dean Martin, those guys, and some other great artists as well. And then Tony was kind of like, for me, I already, got my degree in show business, if you will, and so now Tony got me after I've really learned from, Sammy and, Joe Williams and all those cats. So, so I was a much more developed product, if you will, when I got with Tony but, he was such a great artist and, I did it for 13 years. And Tony, when I left the band, he said to me, Clayton, I've learned so much from you. And I'm like, what? I don't know if he was just being, just totally sweet, which he was, but just for an artist like that great to say that he learned something from someone else, not namely just saying he learned something from me, which I still don't know to this day what it could have been. But that he appreciated me in that way. So so I did that for 13 years, and that was a great period amongst other periods in my career. So so I'm really thankful. If I only had that one, I would have been thankful. But I had it's just such a great experience even years before that. So that Tony Bennett stuff was really great, and it was just timely. It was just one of those things that everything came together. His career, he had been, doing gigs, what they call, those conventions and all that kind of stuff. His career had been, waning, if you will. And then, suddenly we do the recording of Steppin' Out, and that becomes like this huge hit. He had done the tribute to Frank Sinatra before that. But once we recorded Steppin' Out, that was the first record I did with him, the 13 records I did with them. It was incredible, So that MTV came shortly after that, and and it's just another gig in a way. Where they, okay, what are we doing? Oh, we're going to go over to studio. We're going to play in front of a live audience for MTV. Oh, okay, all right. Who knew? That
right,
would become
exactly.
And that performance would become Album of the Year that year.
Yeah, I'm holding the CD right here. I have it on my shelf.
Yeah, 1994, I think.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Yeah, 1994, and that became Album of the Year, which was crazy. It was like, what? Not crazy that it wasn't, but it was up against so much other stuff. I forget what was up that year, but it was just like crazy. And do you not know that the Academy, they created a review board for Album of the Year after that because the record companies were so up in arms that Tony won.
Really?
Yeah, they were. So they created a board, a review board of the voting for Album of the Year, which is crazy. Anyway, that's politics.
Wow. Yep, exactly.
But that was a great experience, and I'm glad you checked it out and had an influence on you. That's fantastic.
Yep, it was a pivotal moment in my looking back on my career. So thank you, and thanks for taking the time and always making yourself available when we're near each other to talk for a little bit and for answering my questions on this podcast, Clayton.
You got it. No problem, Sean.
Okay, thanks. I'll talk to you later.
All right, you take care.
Today's soundtrack was provided by Clayton Cameron and the Jazz Explosion from their CD called Here's to the Messengers, a tribute to Art Blakey. The link is below the podcast so you can pick up a copy for yourself. I've also provided links so you can check out Clayton's book called Brushworks, a new language for mastering the brushes, available at Carl Fisher Music. I provided links to Clayton's TED Talks, his page at UCLA, and his website. So check him out, and thanks for listening.